So what's the weakest link in security? It's always people. It's not the technology. It's always the people who don't follow the policies, don't follow the standards that have been set up, don't configure the devices that you have. People are always the problem. So that's why employee management is very important when you're looking at security. This deals with when you're bringing somebody new in, when you're actually firing them or laying them off, or the training. So we're going to look at each one of those. Something common that we say in the industry is that with security it's 80-20. 80% of your threats are internal and 20% are external. And what this means is that a lot of your problems that are going to take place are actually within the network. And it's users making mistakes. It's not necessarily your employees are malicious, but they have direct and privileged access to your assets. So they're the ones that are going to cause usually the most problems. So employee management's important, that they actually know what the policies are, what's expected of them. There's communication structure, like if they see somebody doing something they're not supposed to, or there's something suspicious, who do they actually report this stuff to? So with employees, you need to have their position defined, and this is particularly with people who have any type of security responsibility, like the data owners or data custodians or whatever. It needs to be written in their actual job description that this is part of their responsibility. And when you're filling these types of sensitive positions, you need to think about, what type of screening you're going to do. You need to carry out account management. Look at how you're going to detect unauthorized activities. All of this falls under employee management. Now, something that HR is getting better about is how people are hired. The pre-employment things are a lot more strict than they used to be. It used to be that they just hire you because you have a certain skill set. And now they ask you all of these weird, feel-good kind of questions, like if you were working with somebody you didn't like, what would you do in that situation? Well, you're not going to, I'm going to cut them up with an axe. You're not going to say that. But they're going to ask you all these questions. And the reason is because when you hire somebody, it's not just their skill set. It's the actual character. It's the person that you're bringing on board. So when you're hiring somebody, you may need to do a background check. You need to look at their education and experience. Those are two things that people most lie about: what amount of education they have, the amount of experience. And then you need to have termination processes and procedures. So if somebody's going to be laid off or they're going to be fired, you go through an exit interview, which means you explain to them by themselves what's going on. Companies that want to protect their sensitive information, when they actually hire the employee, they'll have them sign a non-disclosure agreement saying that you can't share our secrets. Now, at the termination process, you might want to remind them, look, you signed this, and you're legally responsible not to share our secrets. You also need to turn off their accounts so that they can't have access. They need to be escorted out of the building. They need to return all of the possessions for the company. So you need to have these procedures because there's been so many bad things that's happened in the past where people would get fired and they didn't follow these strict procedures, and then they went off and shot people or did terrible things. So it seems kind of cold, especially when it's just a layoff, that guards are actually taking the poor employee who just got laid off to the door, but it's protecting the company and the employees overall. So there should be some type of a checklist that actually is followed. HR is getting, like I said, most corporations are getting a lot better about following specific things on hiring and firing. It doesn't happen as loosey-goosey as it used to before. Now, one thing that's important not only in the industry, it's important for the exam also, but an unfriendly termination. So when you know that you have a problem child, you know that you're firing somebody and they're not going to be very happy about it and they're going to be revengeful, you need to, of course, follow all of the things that I talked about. But one of the most important things is to get that account, their account to the network, turned off or disabled. And the companies have been in very interesting positions where I remember one company who was, they had a network administrator who, thought he was great. He thought he was God, and he wasn't very nice to people. And so when people complained, management brought him in and says, hey, look, you need to shape up or we're getting rid of you. And what the network administrator said is, well, if you get rid of me, I've got, this place, I've got logic bombs, I've got Trojan horses. So if you get rid of me, there's things I could do. So management was scared, and they didn't fire him. And then he continued with, not being good to people and everything. And they did fire him. And then he erased 2 of their whole databases, all their information. And that's just one story. There's a lot of stories that we don't hear about that people carry out. That's because they have to have privileged access to our sensitive data. They're the ones, like the administrators or the engineers have direct access. So you need to really understand who has what type of access, especially in our environments where we don't have an overall identity management access control program, which means you can pull access from all systems at one time. A lot of our environments, you have accounts at different systems that you have to make sure are properly disabled. So if it's an unfriendly termination, it's important to make sure that they don't have access to the system right away. Now, security awareness training needs to take place, and this is something that's a lot of regulations are demanding, and companies that don't have it in place are now actually working hard to get it in place because the auditors have put it down that they don't have it. Now, security awareness is for everybody. That's for everybody in the company, and it's kind of high level. It talks about the policies and classification levels and such. And one thing that some people don't realize is that security awareness training isn't just training the people, it's actually a legal protection. This is a way, say you have an employee and they do something bad. They share confidential information, they download pornographic information or something, and then you want to go and fire them. And they say, I didn't know that was bad, or I didn't know that was the right thing to do. If you did your security awareness training, you could say, yes, you did know, and follow through, because there's been a lot of companies that didn't have policies in place, they didn't have security awareness in place, and when they fired somebody for doing something wrong, the employee came back and sued and actually won. So security awareness isn't just about training, it's also legal protection. Now, the different levels of people need different types of skills. So there's actually training that'll take place, and some regulations are making sure that you have the right skill level of the people in different roles. And then there's actually education, where that's usually what you're looking at, degrees and such. So there's a difference between education, training, and security awareness. So looking at the security awareness, we're just learning information. In training, it's the how. How do we actually carry out security activities? And that's more knowledge. And then the education is why. Have deeper understanding of why this stuff actually takes place. So the main thing is, who are you putting in these different roles to protect the company? What is it that they need to know, and to what level? So as I said, that security awareness is not only teaching people what the rules are, it's also a due care thing with liability. And you should do several different things. You shouldn't just have, an annual security awareness class. A lot of, especially the larger companies, have online courses. They have posters, or they have banners, or they have memos, or they have things that go out to educate the users about the new viruses, or what to do if there's an incident that takes place. Another thing that I see that doesn't take place in a lot of organizations is enforcement. Companies will go through a lot of effort, spend a lot of money with coming up with the technical solutions, the processes, the policies. They do all of that, but then they don't have procedures or a thought about, well, what happens when people don't follow our rules? Who's going to enforce? How does that enforcement take place? And most of us know that if there's rules and there's not ramifications for not following them, then they're not overly important. So enforcement is actually very important, that people know that something's actually going to happen. But a lot of, in the corporate world, they're not very good about enforcement. In the military, the government, they're much better about that. So we covered a lot of information, and I have another question that I want you to go through. And again, the reason that I'm doing this is because a lot of the information that we've covered today is not complex. This test covers an inch deep and a mile wide, so it's not overly complex, but the questions are going to be tricky. So take a minute, go through this question, and figure out what you think the right answer is. Okay, so the right answer is B, using access controls. And if we look at the question, it says, a company needs to be concerned about an asset's reliability, confidentiality, and integrity. What is used to enforce protection of integrity? Now, control A, controlling physical security. Well, there could be digital things that affect the integrity. So physical security isn't enough. C talks about enforcing the rules of confidentiality, which is not integrity. D is talking about logical security, which is technical. The exam actually uses, and the industry use, logical and technical interchangeably. So D just talks about technical. And remember, we have administrative, physical, and technical controls. So that's why B is the right answer, using access controls, because it actually includes A, C, and D. And that's kind of how this exam goes, is a lot of times there's a question or there's an answer that covers the rest of the answers. And why some people think that they'll take the exam and they'll be there and they'll say, boy, there's 2 right answers, or there's 3 right answers, and they'll go over and over and over again. But one of the answers most likely encompasses the other 2 answers. So using access control covers physical security, it covers logical security, and C, we're not even talking about confidentiality.